Welcome to another Thursday night Bible study, brought to you as a ministry of SIGBC.
Well, good evening, and welcome to another Thursday night Bible study as we contemplate today our final contemplation of the fruit of the Spirit in our series on bearing fruit for Christ, the fruit of the Spirit being self-control. Now, if we are to review what we've talked about so far in this particular passage, we read, "So I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh." And of course, self-control is very much attached to not gratifying the desires of the flesh. He continues in Galatians chapter 5, verse 22, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law." In other words, you can do as much of these. You can love as much as you want. You can be as happy as you want. You can have as much peace as you like. You can have as much forbearance or kindness or goodness, or forbearance being patience, of course. Faithfulness, gentleness, and now as much self-control as you can possibly handle. It's permitted. So, when we think of self-control, the King James uses the word temperance. So, it ends with, the fruit of the Spirit is temperance, and against such things there is no law. And when you think of the word temperance, often we imagine the temperance societies of the 19th and 20th centuries in America, around the world, but particularly in our case in America, where it became law. So temperance societies were organized social movements, which, as I mentioned, peaked around the 19th and 20th century. And the temperance societies or temperance movements promoted that moderation or even total abstinence of alcohol was the only responsible course of action for people to take. And that's why it was called the Temperance Society, because it was called self-control societies. They were emphasizing this because there was a lot of economic hardship that was taking place as a result of alcohol abuse. There were families that were being destroyed as a result of people who were becoming alcoholics. And health was being destroyed. So finances, families, and health were all direly affected by alcoholism. As a matter of fact, when I was a kid, I remember reading the story of a father who was an alcoholic. And he was such an alcoholic that he was not able to provide for his family. And long story short, his youngest son got sick, and they didn't have the money to go to the doctors, and so his youngest son died. And as they were having the funeral, the father looked down and he saw his youngest son in the casket, and he saw that he was wearing shoes, and he thought, well, he's not going to need those shoes in the grave. And so he reached down, and when nobody was watching, he took the shoes off of his dead son's body before they closed the casket. And then he took those shoes and he went and he sold them. And then he took the money, and what do you think he did with it? Yep, bought alcohol. And while he was sitting there drinking, it dawned on him what he had done and how low he had sunk in even not caring about the life of his own son, caring more about alcoholism. And so that was a type of society that was surrounded in the idea of temperance societies, because it was destroying economies, it was destroying families, it was destroying people's health. And so self-control became a serious focus in America in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Heavily driven, of course, by religious groups and, of course, primarily women's groups. These organizations, they shifted from encouraging people to voluntarily avoid drinking to eventually lobbying in Congress for legal, what they called prohibition. And we entered the prohibition era of American politics, where it became illegal to make alcohol, it became illegal to drink alcohol, it became illegal to sell alcohol. And so that, of course, it culminated in major legislative changes like the 18th Amendment in America. And so temperance at that time was primarily focused on anti-alcohol abuse, and it resulted in people being forced to not drink. Well, the Greek idea of self-control is not that we force others to do what we want them to do. So the word temperance, even though it conjures up the idea of anti-alcohol abuse of the 19th and 20th century, the reality is it's primarily focused on choice. It's focused on me choosing for myself what I'm going to allow in my life. And so there are several things we'd like to look at with self-control. We'll continue this study next week, of course. But the first observation is that self-control most certainly involves the choice to practice self-sacrifice. In other words, it's not something that is externally imposed. Self-control has to do with the choice to practice self-sacrifice. And so in Luke chapter 14, verse 25 through 27, we read, "Large crowds were traveling with Jesus, and turning to them, he said, 'If anyone comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple. And whoever does not carry their cross and follow me cannot be my disciple.'" In other words, self-control most certainly involves the choice to practice self-sacrifice or self-discipline. It is an acknowledgement of the best course of action and a willingness to sacrifice whatever is necessary to accomplish what you know is best for yourself. Now, there are lots of things that we can practice self-control in that are not related to alcohol abuse. Sometimes self-control is involved in reading the Bible over watching a movie, for example. Or sometimes self-control is involved in exercise instead of eating that 8th slice of pizza. Sometimes self-control involves choosing to do something like exercise or choosing not to do something like eating unhealthily. And so it is going to involve the choice to practice self-sacrifice, because we voluntarily choose to give up something that we might find personally beneficial, but not in the long run, not in reality. And so if you look at the Greek word for self-control, it's egkrateia. And egkrateia can be translated, again, temperance or self-control, but it actually reflects the virtue of one who masters his desires and passions. And in many cases in the scriptures, it refers to his sensual appetites. So the fruit of the Spirit is egkrateia, temperance, the virtue of mastering one's desires and passions or appetites. So self-control most certainly involves the choice to practice self-sacrifice, self-discipline, self-control. Number 2, self-control is best motivated by counting the cost of both the merits and demerits of a given choice. So you have in any given opportunity benefits and costs. You've probably heard the saying, everything in life is hard. So exercise is hard. Being obese is hard. Diet is hard. Being unhealthy is hard. Saving money is hard. Being poor is hard. So you have all these not really a matter of one part is easy and one part is hard, but both choices are difficult. It's just a matter of, is it difficult now or is it difficult later? And so self-control has to do with choosing to face difficulty now so that we can have more opportunities in our future. Naturally, anti-alcoholism would fit right into that, because can you imagine if you drank, let's just say for example, if you drank 2 cans of beer a day and each can of beer costs 350 yen, then that's 700 yen a day. And that would be in 1 month over 2 mon 1,000. And in 1 year, you're talking about over $1,500 or 24 mon just for 2 beers. And imagine what you could do with that money. And so self-control is best motivated by counting the cost of both the merits and demerits of a given choice, calculating risk, doing a cost-benefit analysis, and then weighing the pros and cons of either choice. Now, we're going to continue talking about this particular aspect of self-control next week, because believe it or not, we're already out of time today. But you have 2 illustrations that we're going to be looking at next week as we continue on the importance of self-control. Self-control most certainly involves the choice of practicing self-sacrifice, and self-control is best motivated by counting the costs, both the merits and demerits of any given choice. And so next week we're going to be looking at the illustration of the one who wants to build a tower, and the sacrifice is going to have to be calculated. And then the second illustration is one of the king going to war, one king going to war against another, and sitting down and calculating whether or not he is, with the 10,000 that he has, going to be able to thwart the army of 20,000 that's coming against him. So we'll talk more about that next week.
Thank you for listening. You can also join us in person or live on Facebook every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Japan time. This has been a ministry of Sakahogi International Grace Baptist Church.